welcome back to the next adventure in my solo Brutal V Rising run. We are solidly in Act 3 and we are going into the Cursed Forest today. By the way, I'm Cyril. I make videos about games, development, and creativity, and the settings for this run are that I have turned up some settings around loot and crafting to make it just a little bit less grindy, and I've also turned the V-Blood multiplier to plus 25% instead of plus 70%, and the level to plus 1 instead of plus 3. And I talked about why I did that. I think it was in video 3 or part 3, but the short version is that the default settings were just too hard for me. Now on to the Cursed Forest. People who experience the Cursed Forest for the first time usually hate it, and people who have experienced it before only love it because you can haze new people by sending them in unprepared. The curse is that you can't see anything. From the time you go in, you start building up stacks of this curse debuff, and when it is full, you cannot see anything but fog around you, and even the map and the mini-map are covered in this like foggy texture. This means that enemies can sneak up on you, including some of the wandering bosses in here. If you see Gore Crusher, run as quickly as you can back towards the exit because we are not ready to fight Gore Crusher. I also recommend leaving anything really important at home, for now at least. You'll keep your weapons when you die, but you'll drop everything else unless you have changed the settings for that. I'm not even sure if there is a setting for that. There probably is. But until we can see in here, it is extremely difficult to find your way back to your body. So a good rule of thumb is to not bring anything with you that you can't afford to lose. The first boss in here is pretty easy to get to. You may want to just look it up so you know where you're going. I don't know if anyone out there is wandering the forest to find the bosses. Maybe there are some purists out there, but I know where I'm going. It's basically straight north from the entrance path, and then to the left, or west I suppose, you'll come to an area filled with spiders. If you're afraid of spiders, I'm sorry, we are fighting a big spider next. You can skip ahead, I won't judge you. But once you find the spiders, the curse actually clears up. I guess spider dens are immune to curses or something, because once you're in the area you can see again, and you can make your way through the tunnels until you find the boss, Ungora the Spider Queen. She's in an arena surrounded by little web cocoons that you might be able to guess what's inside, more spiders, and this is what makes the first attempt pretty difficult. They do seem to respawn pretty quickly, but you could probably get at least 2 attempts in before they respawn. So clearing them out is not like a great strategy, but it is a strategy that you can try. Ungora will also pop some of the spider cocoons herself with some of her AoE moves, so even if you try not to touch them, you will end up with a lot of spider ads. But let's talk about the fight. Ungora does a lot of stinky green poison moves, some bullets that fan out, like 5 fan out into a little cone. She drops some sort of slime cannonball that does some damage. And I think a lot of these will also apply a poison effect to you. She also does a lunge, so watch out. Try not to get too close if you can avoid it. She also will web you, and I can't tell if this is part of the lunge or if it is a separate move, but I got caught in a web almost immediately. I used my skeleton strategy, which did help a lot. It helped to hold Ungora's attention, and it also helped distract some of the ads during the fight, because there's going to be a lot of little spiders running around. Even if you're pretty good about getting ads down, you'll still probably have a bunch of spiders. I did okay on this first attempt, but I got caught a few too many times in the poison and in the webs, so I died. On my second attempt, the cocoons were still down, so it's a lot cleaner in the arena. I don't have as many ads to worry about. However, I got really stuck in some of the slime puddles when I got slowed down, and so I died again. On attempt 3, I used my skeleton army much earlier and tried to burn the boss as fast as I could. I was also more diligent in using my shield on those little bullets, trying to absorb as many of them as I could reach. The longbow is becoming a favorite boss weapon of mine at this point, especially when the boss has a bunch of adds, because I think the combination of the high single target damage and also the little AoE cone, I think makes it really useful for fights with a lot of adds, but also gives you decent boss damage. And this third time, things went much more smoothly. I think focusing the boss really helped here because the adds just didn't have time to really build up and overwhelm me. And also, a very important thing I totally forgot to mention on the way in, while you're in the spider area, you want to collect as many silkworms as you can. Silkworms are absolutely necessary for a lot of the late game crafting, and most importantly, the gear that comes up next. So you'll need these little wiggly babies. They'll be walking around on the ground. You pick them up with like F or whatever your key is. And they will spawn more if you kill some of the spiders and also when you destroy the cocoons. Ungora's V-Blood unlocks the ability to craft the silkworms into silk, summon spiders at that big sewer thing, and gives you spider form, which I think you can use to go underground during the day. I'm not sure, I don't really use it that much. Next, I took care of my friends, my guests who I keep in the dungeon. I feed them a lot of fish, and all I ask for in return is a few dozen vials of their blood. And then I did my other vampire chores. We all know how this goes by now. You know, collect wood for paper crafting, harvest all the herbs, make any potions I need. And then, once my vampire chores are done, back into the cursed forest we go. The next boss we're going after is another wanderer, and he's literally called Ben the Wanderer. The good news is that if we can defeat him, he will give us the ability to see through the fog. The bad news is we have to find him in the fog first, and he wanders, I think, through like the whole forest basically. The blood tracking does work on Ben, but he moves very quickly, and there are all kinds of other beasties in the forest that get in your way, slow you down, and then in the case of Gore Crusher, some that will just stomp you, one-hit stomp you basically. I did not have to go that far to find Ben, but the next step after you find him is actually defeating him. If you attack Ben, you'll notice that he is not really interested in fighting you at all. That would normally make him one of the safest bosses on Brutal, but as he flees, again, you have to navigate the cursed forest and deal with any mobs that come up. I think he also does a few little hits. I'm not sure. He's definitely not a dangerous boss, but something entangled me as I was running through the forest, and I think he also like hits things with his staff. He may also call out to nearby mobs and aggro them, kind of the way that Beatrice does on normal mode with the guards. And sure enough, the first attempt he did get away. He got far enough to reset him to full health, and I had to start again chasing him down. Having the skeletons on him helped me because I could see where they were going as they followed him, and it gave me another little indicator of where he went. The second time, I managed to get him. He's not terribly tanky, which is such a relief because this fight is already pretty annoying, and I think if he had a lot of health it would be even worse. And a pro tip for people in the Cursed Forest for the first time, something that I learned, is that you can actually build the cloak from your inventory, the one that lets you see in the fog. So right after you defeat Ben and unlock the V-Blood, as long as you have the ingredients, you can craft it from your pockets. It does cost a little bit more from your pockets than it would on a crafting bench in like a room with the upgrade, but it's not too bad. So you'll want some pristine hides, ghost shrooms, as well as some plant fiber. So as you go through the forest, collect the mushrooms you see, collect any hides from the beasts that you kill, and you should be good to go, hopefully. With the cloak, you do actually have to wear it, and then the fog will go away. So I usually just keep this with me if I ever think I will need to go into the Cursed Forest. You swap it on, and then when you leave you can swap your regular cloak back on because I think it has more like resistances and stuff. Before heading back, I decided to go and get some more materials for later. There are some little ghost towns in here that have a new kind of ore, ghost crystal. I'm pretty sure we can't use it for anything yet, but we will end up needing a lot of this, and I want to have some ready. One thing you'll notice is that there are no living humans in the Cursed Forest, at least not that I've seen. A lot of creature blood, a lot of ghosts, but I guess it's too cursed for people to set up villages here. I had asked someone how you get the Cursed Forest buff on a servant if there's no humans, and they told me that the werewolves just outside the Cursed Forest, which we'll meet later, apparently count as like Cursed Forest residents or whatever. I have yet to try that myself, but that's what I was told, and I thought I'd mention it in case anyone else was curious like I was. Along with the cape, Ben unlocks pristine leather, which relies heavily on having a lot of mutant grease. You need so much mutant grease, I can't even emphasize this enough. To build the endgame armor you need so much pristine leather, which means you need so much mutant grease. So maybe do some farming runs out there and get that ready. I also don't really remember if I talked about the Ancestral Forge, but at this point I have created one ancestral weapon, so I'll just talk about it real quick in case I forgot. But as a loot drop from certain bosses and also the vendors in Mortium, you can also get these broken ancestral weapons. The blue ones are for our current level Later there'll be some purple ones, and then there are a very specific set of orange, like legendary ones that are available in the end game. You need the Ancestral Forge to repair them, which we unlocked recently, and you just plop them into the forge and you can see there which items you need to repair it. Usually you need the fanciest version of the weapon, and then you use that to repair it along with other things. So for this blue one we need radium bars, which we also just unlocked, and then we can get this ancestral weapon, which has additional like effects on it, additional skills, additional effects. And then, as I understand it, the blue and purple, the normal ones, are randomly generated, so you can sort of just keep collecting them, see which ones work well with the skills, the build that you have. But the legendary ones are predetermined. They have names, they have a certain set of effects and abilities on them. So definitely look those up if you aren't sure what sort of if you're still deciding what sort of legendary you want to go for. Every time you buy the highest level weapon in Mortium, there's a chance for it to be the legendary version, and it's extremely expensive to buy them. It's 1,500 of the greater shards, so I would really recommend looking up the stats, looking up the effects, making sure that you know what you want before you spend all of those shards, because I didn't realize that they were like preset, and so I wasted a lot of shards going for something that actually didn't exist. And as I stopped back at home, I made a few more ancestral weapons because I've seen people using the spear and the scythe for a couple of these cursed forest bosses, which I'm not really that familiar with, but I wanted to try them out, so I made some ancestral weapons of those, mostly because I already had them and I have plenty of radium bars at the moment. And then I'm off to the Cursed Forest again, this time with my eye on Foulrot the Soultaker. This guy is hilarious. Another boss where I'm sad I didn't get the audio recorded because he's just so funny. The voice lines are like, I don't know, like a lot of them are puns, they're a little silly, and I just love that, even if it's kind of gross like this guy, because Foulrot wears a horse head. I wasn't sure if he had a horse head or he was wearing one. I read the description. Apparently this is the decapitated head of his own horse, so that's gross, but it's still funny when he says a bunch of like horse related things, and he does like a sort of whinnying laugh that made it very hard to focus because it made me laugh too hard. I did die trying to get to him, and then I realized I left my new armor at home. That will really help, so I went back to grab it and made my way out again. These ghost villages are really annoying. I feel like there are way too many patrols. I kept running into them and accidentally pulling them during some of these Cursed Forest boss fights, but eventually I made it to Foulrot and did like a proper attempt. He does not wander, he lives in this village. Foulrot's theme for his attacks is a little bit more muddy than some of the others. He uses the illusory magic, the illusion magic, but for once in this game, he doesn't shoot out a bunch of elemental bullets. He dual wields what appears to be two long blades, long fat blades. I always think of the Drawfee obsession with the Italian cold steel Cincadilla, if I've even said that correctly. But he does need to get like kind of close range to hit you, so he does a lot of walking around. He'll also do a little teleport where he will land on top of you and slow you down. He'll also summon some ghostly adds, as well as having a little shield phase where you can kind of focus on those adds. In general, don't hit bosses when they are shielded. In addition to his shield phase, there is a counter move. You should probably not hit him when he's countering. He'll come out of the shield phase on his own, and then you can get back to your fight. And in general, this guy was fairly easy in terms of like difficulty and strategy. He's not too quick, he doesn't do anything really surprising. It just takes a bit of attention and getting those adds down. And there he is, Foulrot, another first try boss fight. Like I said, I think he's one of the easier ones. I definitely had a lot of trouble with a few of the other Cursed Forest bosses, so just wait for that. The big thing that Foulrot unlocks is the ability to craft spectral dust, which is what we can use the ghost crystal for. The next boss, which I came prepared to fight next, I don't have to go home, is the Duke of Balaton, who I affectionately refer to as the Frog Duke. I think he's technically a toad, I don't care. I got a little turned around on this one, actually several times. I thought he was in one of these little areas based on the names, but the blood trail pointed me somewhere else, so I must have been remembering wrong. Because of my bad pathfinding, I actually stumbled into Cyril the Cursed Smith, and just because I was there and I knew he was coming up, I decided to fight him anyway just to see how it went. I actually did so good on this first attempt, it was insane. How incredible it would have been to get him down first try, knowing how this fight goes for me later. But as I said before, I'm not really a person who gets every boss down on the first try, so I need more practice. So I didn't get Cyril down on this little surprise attempt, but I did get him down to 30 or 40%, which is incredible in hindsight. After 2 wrong guesses about where I had to go, I finally made it to the Frog Duke's lair. He's in a little clearing in a swamp, absolutely surrounded by smaller frogs and other critters. I almost died just fighting the trash mobs to get in there because there's a lot of poison and a lot of grappling. I saw someone using the spear for this fight, I think because it does creature damage, but I actually don't know if V-Bloods count as like types of creatures for the weapon damage. But since I didn't really use the spear and I saw people using it, I thought I'd try it out on this fight and see how it goes. And this is another fight that gave me a bit of trouble because of some of the positioning stuff. Albert has a few different moves, mostly tongue-based. He does a big swipe from side to side with his tongue, kind of like a cleave, and he will also grab and eat you and then spit you out somewhere, doing quite a bit of damage. And he summons frog ads or toad ads that do smaller versions of a lot of his attacks. He will also leap into the air and drop a bunch of poison on the ground. So there's a lot going on, a lot of dodging area of effect, a lot of watching for that cue when he's going to do the tongue grab. And a word of warning for this guy: the arena is open on the sides, but you cannot leave the arena or he will reset. Problem number 1 for me was just finding space to get out of all the AoEs and to get away from the ads, because the arena itself is fairly small, and I did end up resetting him a bit when I tried to run out around the walls a little bit. Getting eaten was another really troublesome mechanic for me, and I'm not totally sure how to avoid it because I feel like the animation where he does the grab is pretty quick. Like the telegraphing does not give you very much time to react at all. I'm not sure if a shield will block it. I would guess no, but I'm not sure that I tried that specifically, so maybe it'll work for you, I'm not sure. My next attempt I actually did too close to daytime and ended up doing almost the entire fight in the sun, trying to just pop back into these shadows and stop myself from burning to death, and surprisingly it went really well. Somehow I managed to get him down to a tiny sliver of health before he did kill me at the last minute, and then my skeleton got him after I was dead. Watching this attempt back, I think I was clearly starting to learn the timing of the tongue grab because I was able to sidestep it and avoid getting gobbled up, so maybe that is just a matter of practice. Fortunately, I was able to run back in time to get the V-Blood before he despawned, so we've got another Cursed Forest boss down. The Frog Duke does not unlock much, unfortunately. He's kind of just another cog in the machine. He gives something that looks kind of useful, toad form, but don't get your hopes up. I think I heard that toad form used to be useful and then they nerfed it, but it has this big jump. That's kind of its selling point. But so far in the game, I haven't actually found a place where you can use the jump to get anywhere useful. It's not easy to direct the jump direction when you jump. It seems kind of random. And even when you can direct the jump, it seems like your character deliberately refuses to land on ledges and things. I've tried it in several places with no luck, so the Frog Duke is useful if you want to mint your own coins, but otherwise there's not a lot here to work with. The next boss is, I think, technically part of the Cursed Forest. In my mind, he's outside of it, but that's where I went next. No prep or vampire chores, just straight blitzing through all these Act 3 bosses. I've noticed that in V Rising, even though Act 2 is sort of the longest one with the most bosses in it, the game really goes like on rails through Acts 3 and 4. I feel like you have such a clear path forward and there's not too much grinding to do in between. There's a little bit of grinding to get certain materials, but for the most part, the whole second half of this game, you can move it through it very quickly. Near the entrance to the Cursed Forest, there is a village that looks normal by day, but by night, it is full of werewolves. This is a very good place to farm pristine hide, but be careful because these werewolves are pretty strong. It's usually possible to pull one of them at a time, so you should be able to handle it if you're careful, and they also have some good human loot in their little houses. Wilfred, the werewolf chief, is in the back of the village looking menacing. His main battle mechanic is his ability to consume human adds to heal himself, so anytime during this fight you see humans come up, you will want to kill them as quickly as you can to avoid letting Wilfred eat them. He behaves a lot like the normal werewolves do, with big slashes. His usually happen in a set of 3, and you can shield through those. It's a good way to like farm up like charges on your shield. That's a strategy that I used whenever I could time it right. He also does a charge if you get away from him that can be pretty rough. And he summons these Shadow Wolf adds, and I think this might be the brutal mode change. I don't remember seeing these on normal mode, but they might have been there. They're just wolf adds that you have to deal with on top of the human adds. I used the lightning ultimate for this, and it seemed to work for any fight, honestly, that has like a lot of adds that are in a relatively small area, because the tricky part of the lightning is lining it up, because once you start it, you cannot move. It stays sort of where it is. So the tricky part is starting this move when the humans are clumped up as much as they can be. At some point in the fight, Wilfred will go invisible, and you can kind of see a little shimmer in the air where he is, but he will pop out of the invisibility and try to get you. I got to that phase and then died on my first attempt. On the second attempt, it was daytime, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I just killed him while he's human? So I did that. And no surprise here, he does not put up much of a fight, but even worse, he doesn't have V-Blood as a human, so this is completely useless. I had to accept the consequences of my actions and wait for him to respawn. And holy cow, that's when I realized that this is the second to last boss of Act 3. I did some of my vampire chores to prepare for later fights, and then I headed back to the werewolf village at night this time. And of course, since it had been too long, all the mobs respawned and I had to clear the village out again. I only have myself to blame for this. When I was able to fight him again, it went super well. I was able to get almost all of the humans caught in my ultimate, so he wasn't able to heal, and at this point I was a little more familiar with the timing on the slashes so I could shield them better, and I managed to defeat Wilfred the werewolf chief. He gives a very important recipe, the silver resistance potion. You will need this to make the next level of weapons and armor because you can't pick up the silver if it kills you when you do, so this is very good to have. And he also unlocks a new bag that can hold more silver coins, gives a little bit more resistance. After getting some of that together, I farmed some mutant grease by spawning mutant rats at the little sewer thing in the alchemy room. One day I'll remember what this thing is actually called. I did several rounds of mutant rats. You do need a bit of mutant grease to spawn them in, but once you have a sort of minimum amount, the rats will always give you more mutant grease than you spend to summon them. So you just need to kind of spend the glass and the iron to make the sludge canisters. The next part of the game is another boss that nearly destroyed me, Cyril the Cursed Smith, the final boss in Act 3. They really made these final bosses of the acts much harder, and while I generally think that's good game design, I found them so frustrating. I don't even know how many times Cyril killed me, but it's funny looking back because I did so well on that first throwaway attempt. So know that when I fought this guy, I was constantly switching weapons, switching armor, trying to figure out if I could get the next level of gear and come back. I couldn't really because I need his skills to actually make it. I wanted to give up so many times during this gauntlet, but I had the sunk cost fallacy telling me I can't give up now, I've already done so much. So I just kept trying. But in this video, I'm going to cut these attempts down as much as I can so that everyone watching doesn't have to face the same mind-numbing repetition that I did. But on to the fun part. What does Cyril actually do as a boss? As the blacksmith, the main thing he does is summon a variety of ghostly weapons. That is the biggest challenge in this fight because each weapon is its own mob, it's an ad, and they all have special moves, and the special moves are specific to the weapon type. The slashers will do the in and out slash move, the axes will do their ranged move, the hammer does the big AoE, and so on. The weapons also seem to have a decent amount of health. It's not as easy as just burning them all down immediately. At least I wasn't able to do that. They tended to build up for me. And I did learn that Cyril is in this little shady spot. As long as you don't go too far away from him, it is safe to fight here during the day. But, still kind of risky if you wander a little bit too far towards the entrance. In between summoning the weapons, he also has weapons and moves that he uses on his own. The hammer he kind of does use on his own. I guess it's not really, there's not usually a separate hammer, but he does a big AoE, spawns a bunch of orbs that fly outward. And these kind of look like the orbs that Pelora has, but they aren't quite as vicious. However, they do seem to live almost forever. By the middle of the fight, the entire arena was just full of these orbs, slowly swirling in a circle. As he does his moves, he will also be switching the weapon he's using, so if you can see the weapon, you can predict what he will do. My brain doesn't always work fast enough for that, especially with all the other weapons and things flying around and the orbs to dodge, but it's a good thing to be aware of. He will do big slashes with the sword. He will do the back and forth dash with the slashers. He throws a spear that has a really long range, so watch out for that. There's probably more different weapons that he uses that I wasn't able to keep track of, but I'll try to put as much footage of the different weapons in this video as I can so you can see what they look like. I also want to warn you about the patrolling mobs. They do wander right near the entrance of the arena, and I got sort of pushed into the mobs a few times and aggroed them. And obviously when the fight is already kind of difficult, having additional mobs that aren't typically part of the fight is a bad thing. So it's a good idea to clear the area even if it's a little bit tedious. And then unfortunately sometimes they would just respawn in the middle of the fights. Not much I could do about that. I tried basically every weapon I have for this fight, and I think if you're comfortable with it, the scythe is probably the best. I think it has enough of an AoE capability and also a bit of range that I think you would need to consistently do damage on both Cyril and the ads. I struggled really hard with the scythe just because I don't use it often enough. I kept coming back to the slashers because they are comfortable and help with both movement and also dropping aggro on some of the ads. The attempts that I did the best at were the ones where I stopped the weapon ads from piling up too fast. I think focusing ads can feel counterproductive because on the other hand, you want to get the boss down so you can just be done with this whole thing. But I do think spending a little bit of extra attention getting ads down as fast as possible helped me survive the longest. Skeletons also helped distract the weapon ads a little bit so I wasn't targeted by all of their special moves, which helped a lot. And one thing I can see in some of these fights that I'm not doing enough of is just using my regular weapon attack. I think I tend to get overwhelmed and feel like my regular attacks don't do enough damage to be worth prioritizing, but I think that's not the case. Like chipping away at these ads more would have made the fight easier, and every health point counts. There was one attempt where I got him down to a sliver. This was probably my 6th or 7th attempt, so I was already feeling a little discouraged. To get so close just made me angry. After somewhere between like 8 and 10 attempts, I kind of lost count. I headed back to make some different jewels and see if there was anything I could get to help me make this fight easier. I'm looking for any jewels or anything that will help add AoE damage or maybe even incapacitate some of these ads. In hindsight, I think a different spell selection might have been good here. The shield is great, but I kept missing with the skeleton orb thing because everything was moving around so much. And I also kept missing Cyril because he would jump up into the air. And so something easier to aim or more of an AoE effect like one of the ground circle effects probably would have been better than trying to do these skill shots. After another few failed attempts, I tried to see if maybe I could get some more gear, but alas, you need Cyril to make it. They have a certain progression for the acts in this game, and while you can do the bosses within each act kind of in any order you want for the most part, they don't want you to skip to the next act early. I did so many failed attempts that I actually had to stop and take a break for the day and came back the next day because I just ran out of time. I started using the Death Knight skill instead of these skeleton orbs, and even though this attempt went a lot better, apparently I didn't like it at the time because I swapped back to the skulls right after. I did another dozen or so attempts, failed at all of them, went home to see about making some frost spell jewels, maybe slow some things down, and then a rift incursion caught my eye, so I went to do that instead. And I was still very frustrated about Cyril, so I spent some time making some more weapons that I didn't have yet, and outfitting some of my other spells with jewels, just in case I wanted to try them out later. Finally, I went back to face Cyril. I tried all electric moves for a while, and this was actually really good for handling adds because the electricity does a sort of chain lightning thing. I used the ball lightning and the veil and the ultimate, and these are all pretty big AoEs that make it easier to burn down adds. I also tried out the crossbow because it's got that big AoE move. It just doesn't hit any individual mob for that much, so it helps with targeting but not really burning down the adds. But now I'm gonna show my final successful attempt. So on my success attempt, I was using the skull orbs, corrupted skull, whatever it's called, the unholy shield, my spider ultimate, along with the crossbow, which honestly I'm still getting used to. I think the biggest success in this attempt was just that I had a really great start to the fight. I was able to get the first batch of adds defeated very quickly, so they didn't have the chance to whittle me down. I managed to dodge a lot of those early attacks and get a few good regular attacks off on the boss while he was distracted by skeletons and between the sets of adds. So I was able to get him down to almost 50% before taking too much damage. Then when he was able to spawn in more adds, I tried to stay around the outside of the arena and shoot inward. I feel like this helped me keep track of everything, and then because I've got sort of my back up against the wall, I only have one direction to avoid damage from. So I'm always moving, trying to put distance between myself and these ranged attacks, and this was a really close call, but I managed to dodge enough of the attacks and just pick away at Cyril's health. It was a fairly slow fight for me as well, and you have to be on your game the entire time, so it's a really tough one, tests your endurance a little bit, but I got him. I was so incredibly relieved when I defeated Cyril, I can't even explain it. It was a mix of relief and also fear, because if this is what Cyril is like, I was worried about going into Act 4. But we don't stop to think about that too much, we just keep going. Cyril is absolutely critical as he gives us the ability to make the forge, or anvil I think it's called, advanced furnace, and dark silver ingots. Dark silver is necessary because we can't touch regular silver, and this is what all the end game stuff is made out of, so we will need a good amount of it. The best place to find silver is in the silver mines, but we are going to do that next time. With Act 3 complete, the next video we will start Act 4 and just sort of rapidly start approaching the end of the game. I really like a lot of the bosses in Act 4, and they start to get more interesting in my opinion. I'm just gonna guess that a lot of those bosses were added later when the dev team had a better feel for how they wanted their game to go, because a lot of the mechanics are more fun, even if they are sometimes punishing. But for now, that's all I've got. We're gonna wrap it up here and we'll be back again soon. Please like this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more, because I'll be back with another video and I hope to see you there. Bye bye!